It's tough. It's a tough locker room in there. There's guys looking for answers, and the truth is, we can't continue to lose to ourselves. We got 12 penalties. We got some critical mistakes by some of our older guys. Offensively, we another situation, a little adversity early in the game, and guys started to abandon their technique and go away from the things that we've been teaching them to do and just trying to play ball. And that's just not who I am. That's not who we are as a program. And because of that, we're not playing complementary football. Defense gave us some short fields. We couldn't capitalize. As soon as we hit a big play, then we have a mental mistake. We have a holding call, a false start, something that gets us behind the chains. And we knew going in, and we told them when we tried to prepare them today, there's going to be a lot of junk that goes on in that interior with the multiple fronts. Hey, just stay the course. Don't abandon. That was one of the big points is, hey, don't abandon the plan. Don't abandon your technique. And we had that issue. But I give the guys credit, man. They fought back in the second half, and they started to have some success. And then you saw once a little bit of momentum, what it does. Now, we didn't have the explosives that we're accustomed to and that we'd like to have, but we found a way to score some points. And defense kept us in the game long enough and kept giving us opportunities. But overall, when you have 12 penalties, okay, they turn the ball over 4 times, and you don't come away with points off those turnovers like you should, then you haven't earned the right to win the game.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jackie Franchuli for Wahoo's 24/7, and you just heard from Virginia head coach Tony Elliott after the loss to Syracuse. Virginia losing 22-20 on the road after failing to complete the second half comeback. And Elliott pretty much summed up what happened. They once again shot themselves in the foot in several instances and lost the game, leaving plenty of points on the field, a lot of missed opportunities, and some mental errors that cost them the game. Now, before we continue on our game recap, why don't you go ahead and like this video on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our channel. And then also, why don't you go ahead and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. And also, please go ahead and leave us a review and rate us. That really helps us out on the algorithms for both YouTube and on the podcast on Apple and Spotify so that we can keep growing this podcast. So I appreciate that. But you don't want to hear from me about that. You want to hear about my thoughts on the game. So before we kind of dive into certain things that we saw on our closer look when we rewatched a game on Sunday nights with our Wahoo 24/7 subscribers, let me bring in the box score so you can see the stats on your screen. So here it is. This is the complete box score of the game for between Virginia and Syracuse. And one thing I want to point out is this is my first time covering a game at Syracuse. At now the JMA Wireless, not the Carrier Dome, but this was my first experience there. And though it wasn't a sellout crowd, my goodness, was that loud. It felt like a sellout crowd. You felt vibrations from how loud it was to the great job by the students there. And it did affect the play on the field. You saw that a little bit in the beginning of the game when the O-line was a little bit unsettled. We had a couple of false start penalties. And that sort of mistakes you expect from an inexperienced O-line. So I just want to point that out first because that did have an impact on the game. It was very, very loud. And poor Greg Medea, who sat near me, it looked at like I'm Italian, so I use my hands. So I was using my hands, talking to him about the game, and was literally shouting. We both were shouting to each other, trying to talk to each other, and we still didn't understand a lot of the times what we were saying. So that was type of the environment that Virginia was playing. Now, let's go over some of these stats. Now, the stats that really jump out at you is obviously if you look at the offensive stats, they had 287 total yards of offense, only 138 passing yards compared to 149 rushing yards. Obviously, when you think of this offense, especially when you know what they're able to do in last season, and it's hard not to compare it to last season, you see what they were able to do last season and you see this now and you're like, wow, okay. You would never have thought that. So they had only had 138 passing, and they had 138 passing on 38 attempts. Now I think that's the one where you like, okay, that is more glaring right there. And we're gonna dive in there in a second. So BA finished 19 of 38 for 138, one touchdown, one interception with a 50% completion rate. Paris Jones, great game by him. Great second half for Paris Jones. He's really started feeling it. He had 13 attempts for 87 yards, one touchdown for 6.7 average per carry. Mike Hollins, I know it's not going to show this on the rushing side of things. He had 2 carries for 22 yards, averaging 11 to carry. On the receiving end, he had 2 catches for 15. But he had a good game. He had a good game in pass protection and in run blocking. A lot of times he was that guy who stayed there in the back to help protect Brennan Armstrong. And sometimes, honestly, he was the last man in defense. And I'm actually going to show you a play where one of the Syracuse guys basically just runs right past Ty Furnish, and Mike Hollins gave Brennan Armstrong just a second he needed to go in and run for a first down. So Mike Hollins did a good job in this game in pass protection and run blocking as well. He was pretty consistent. Actually, Paris Jones and Mike Hollins both did a good job in that area. And then KT led the way in receiving with 8 catches, with 55 yards, averaging. He also had, he had 52 yards per catch. Obviously, you know how hard it is to bring down KT. I like the fact that after the first game and the second game, Des Kitchings realized what type of playmaker KT is and started to feed KT, which is what you want from an OC and from a coach. You adjust to your playmakers, and they realize the instrumental part that KT can play on that offense. When you look at the rest of the receivers, you can see that Dontavian Wicks had 5 catches for 42 yards. He was targeted 10 times, so he had a completion rate of 50%. So those are the main stats there for individuals. Again, they struggled to get third down conversions. This is the second row game in a row for them that they've had struggles there. They ended up 3 for 12 on third down. And remember, against Illinois, they were 1 for 16, and that one first down was actually a defensive holding, which gave them a first down. So again, struggling there. And the big one for me also was that 12 penalties for 106 yards. Again, shooting themselves in the foot. Some of them did come on the offensive side. Obviously, we know about the face mask and the targeting call, which we'll talk about that on the second half of the show. So when you look at those, yes, those go on the defensive side enough. So there's another holding call that negated Cam Butler's sack. So those are 3 calls on the defense that you go, okay, those did give Syracuse chances. But a lot of the ones that occurred that stands out to me are actually on the offense because they delay the momentum going. A lot of them happened in the first half, like a couple of false starts. I think Jonathan Leach had 2 false starts in that first half. Again, I talked about the inexperience playing in that road environment and being very loud. You can see how that could play a game in inexperienced O-line. Now, defensive stats. I know we're going to talk about the defense a little later, but I just want to point this out because I really think this shows how much this team has progressed under Coach Wardzinski and his assistants. When you look at the defensive stats, you see that Hughes was only able to amass 75 yards net on the ground. Sean Tucker, one of the best running backs in the game right now, only had 60 yards rushing, averaging 2.9 yards per carry. And then Sean Tucker receiving, because don't forget, he's been a good instrumental part in the passing game too. He only had 39 yards receiving. And Gadsden, this is the one where I was worried about. I mentioned this in my game preview. I thought this was going to be a possible mismatch nightmare, especially if they work him inside the slot. And he was in the first half. He finished with 113 yards receiving. But after adjustments in the second half, he only had 1 catch for 10 yards. He also had 2 passes thrown to him in that second half, which were for incompletions. So that mismatch that I was worried about played a role in that first half, but they didn't play a role in the second half. So they did a good job on that front. So that's just a roundup of some of the top stats to kind of tell you overall what the story was. Let's dive in a little bit on the offense, because that's what most people are worried about when it comes to Virginia. I know that it's tough, and it's when in sports there is a no moral victory. You win or you lose. But like we've been saying with the defense, defense shows progress every single week. So does the offense. And I know it's hard to kind of wrap your head around saying, like, Jackie, we still lost, we still left points on the field. Yes, but some of those problems were on special teams. You missed 2 kicks in the field goals. Maybe you shouldn't have gone for those. Maybe you should have gone on 4th down. Maybe you should have gone with another kicker who has a stronger leg, but has not been proven yet on the road and type that environment. Again, a lot of other questions, but the offense did show improvement, especially in that second half, especially in that third quarter. The O-line did show improvement. I will say, and I think there's a lot of criticism of Brennan Armstrong around saying that he should be benched and all that stuff. I still think people are underestimating how much pressure BA is under right now with this new offensive line. Now, we use Pro Football Focus a lot on Wahoo's 24/7, just kind of look at how they grade out and looking through the snaps. And one thing that really shows how much he was the most pressured quarterback in the country for the last few weeks. He is now the 5th. So they were number 1. He's number 5. So there's improvement, slight improvement. But that's what we're talking about here. And a lot of it, if they broke down by where they're seeing the pressure, a lot of it is due to the O-line when you look at the breakdown. Now, against Syracuse, for the first time that I've kind of been tracking this, as far as against Power 5 opponents, they were number 81. So, or in the country. Again, there's still pressure there, but it was a little improvement compared to, overall being number 1 to drop down number 5. So they are moving in the right direction. But he's still one of the most pressured quarterbacks. So first, there's that. And also, when you are being pressured so much, and I'm going to actually bring up one of the gifts here that are using closer look, and you're going to see that Ty Furnish was beat. Mike Collins, bless his heart, he gave him Brennan Armstrong a couple seconds with his own block there so that Brennan Armstrong can get that first down. You can see how much pressure he's on. Also, that was a high snap. So when you see that, you can see one of the things that's going to affect him mentally, because no one likes to get hit. Brennan Armstrong is a tough dude. Like his high school coach told me for that feature I did last year, he's a quarterback with a safeties mentality. He's not scared to be hit. But man, if you get hit over and over and over again, you're going to try to avoid to get hit. And one of the things that's going to happen is you might learn bad habits. And that was one of the things that I mentioned, I think, in the first or second episode after game recaps. That was one thing that, I was concerned about. And when you see the pressure, and I'm going to bring another one here where BA is obviously pressured. When you see how much pressure he's under, he's going to start throwing off his back foot. And he's going to start to try to release the ball soon, even when he's not having that pressure. The O-line did a much better job as the game went on, as Coach 2J was able to adjust and let them know what he's seeing when the defense is giving them. And when they adjusted a little bit the game plan in the third quarter, which we'll touch on in a second. So we saw all that. But BA is still mentally thinking, I need to get this ball out because I don't trust my protection. And it's always easy to lose that trust. It's an everyday life. You lose that trust. It's hard to gain it back. So he needs to gain it back. And it's going to take a while. It's going to take more games. And your hope is that this will start clicking and the timing will get better once BA feels, one, comfortable to adjust his own way in the scheme, but also that he gets that trust back, that he has protection. Now, the one thing we did see is there was a change at center. Ty Furnish was switched out for Justice Johnson, and that was due to 2J seeing, I think Justin Johnson would be a better fit for this role. And I am actually going to bring up Pro Football Focus. Again, we do Pro Football Focus grades. If you go to our 24/7 site, you're going to see this more in detail, just so you can see all the grades. So I'm just going to show one part of what we discussed on our site. So this is the pass blocking grade. If you notice the pass blocking grade, you have Ty Furnish at a 16.8 and Justin Johnson's, who was better. He was better under center. He was better at center. It was 24.8. John Paul Flores was graded 54.8. Logan Taylor was 63.0. Jonathan Leach was actually improved himself in the last few games, 68.3. And Derek Devine has been pretty steady in pass blocking. He's 73.2. And like I said, Mike Collins and Paris Jones, again, were pretty consistent that they did well in the pass blocking. So that's pass blocking. You can see what BA is dealing with. Just this is a snapshot. Obviously, PFF doesn't have access to the plays or what have you, but this is this is what we're seeing. And then when it comes to run blocking, which is what we saw the difference when the run game was able to go. And that was something that I mentioned in my predictions. I thought they were going to run the ball more because I thought that was an opening that they can do against Syracuse. When I watched Syracuse plays, I thought they can go up the middle a little bit against them. So when you saw here, you see Justice Johnson was the best run blocker. That is the difference that Justin Johnson will do to you when you put him under center, when you put him at center, and then Brendan can have a little bit more time. So him and then Logan Taylor, John Paul Flores, Derek Devine, they all graded out pretty well. Obviously, you see Ty Furnish is at 53.5, Jonathan Leach at 52.1, but he graded out a little better in pass blocking. So when you see this, you see the potential that UVA has with Justice Johnson at center for run blocking, but you can see what type of pressure Brendan is being dealt with here. And here's a little breakdown of the passing situation for Virginia and BA. If you notice, he's having really a lot of struggles with deep passes. And that's a lot to do with timing. He's releasing a little bit too early a lot of times, or by releasing it, he's overthrowing the ball. Wide receivers are not in the position yet because it's thrown out, or wide receivers are not getting the separation that is needed. So you can see that the numbers aren't there. He's completed only 2 passes past 10 yards. And then you can see that a lot of the short passes, those are the ones that are completed. And that's what the third quarter was about. Third quarter was Paris Jones having that flashy moment, having that moment where he can get out there and run the ball. And also those short passes that gives you confidence. That play action to Grant Mish was a great play call. And the adjustment that Des Kitchings and the staff did was great. I wish they got it sooner, but obviously it came about in the third quarter. And you saw that they were able to adjust. That's something that we've been saying, like in the defense have been able to adjust. This game showed that this offense can adjust. They lacked the execution a few times, but you can see the things coming together. And you can see where the passes were more successful. They were in the middle and the outside. This is where you notice that Billy Kemp is really missed. This is a game that Billy Kemp would have really thrived in, which is a shame that he couldn't come in. Obviously, he was dealing with an illness and he didn't have time to get cleared. He was dealing with dehydration from that illness, which is so. Again, this kind of illustrates our point. Short passes are going to help BA gain that trust with the O-line right now. And I think that's where you're going to see this offense kind of trend moving forward. Pursuing that run game a little bit more because you see that difference with Justin Johnson in the center. And you can see that they're able to block. And then Paris Jones. I know a lot of people are saying, why didn't we see Xavier Brown more? I get it. You see that. I just showed you the pass blocking protections and who were the first 2 there? Mike Collins and Paris Jones. And so you can see why in those incidents. I'm going to put that chart back up there. You can see why Xavier Brown wasn't on there as much. He was 5th with 67.7, so not bad. But again, you can see what Virginia was trying to do. They're trying to help BA. And this was one way they wanted to do it from. So you can see why Xavier Brown was not part of the game plan in that regard. And then once the second half goes, I mentioned this in my game recap last week. I didn't like the fact that they brought Cody Brown in for that one particular drive. I liked the fact that you go with a hot hand. Paris Jones was the hot hand. So you want to go with Paris Jones in those crucial moments. So again, that didn't bother me as much when you look at the bigger picture. The one thing that does bother me a little bit was that this offense is still showing that if things aren't going well, they panic. BA still has that. This is something we didn't see from this offense last year. And again, it's still you're still falling back on what you did last year. You're seeing that from this offense. You're like, this is not working. We're going into panic mode. We have 3 quarters to play, but it's panic mode after this first drive that didn't work out for us. And I think that is the main thing that this offense needs to just calm down, trust the process. It's hard. It's hard for everybody to trust the process. It takes a while. And even my life, we are dealing with, my son's type 1 diabetes. And there's some days it's really stressful. We have to trust his pump. And sometimes, we're learning and things go wrong, but we just know we have to trust the process. It's hard. It doesn't take, we're trying to be my son's pancreas. It takes a while. And this is a new scheme. It takes a while. So you got to just trust the process that eventually things will start clicking. My son's A1C was 16 point something when he was diagnosed. We just got back. He's finally under 8. It was a slow process. It takes time. So that is something that this offense is just trying to do. And I think a lot of it is mental. They have the talent. They have the skills. They have the technique. They just need to trust their technique, trust in the process. And hopefully there's a light bulb moment that will come on. Things are getting better. As I said, Brennan Armstrong was the most pressured quarterback coming after the Illinois game. It got a little bit better against ODU. It's gotten a little bit better after Syracuse. So small improvement. But Brennan needs to know that he can trust his protection again. So that is the offense in a nutshell. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about the defense. So we're back. And welcome back to the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jackie Franciulli for Wahoo's 24/7. And we just got finished recapping a lot of the offensive stats, a lot of what we saw from the offense. So we're going to move to the defense. And honestly, this can be short and sweet when it comes to the defense because, wow, this defense has come a long way since last year. I mentioned some of the stats early on, and I'm just going to reiterate it again, what I wrote here. Sean Tucker had 60 yards rushing, averaged 2.9 yards per carry. That is 2 weeks. 2 games in a row that they stopped. Well, road games in a row, 2 Power 5. Sorry, ODU. That's 2 running backs in a row that they were able to minimize the damage. Again, bend, not break. They're living by that motto. Against Syracuse, 1 touchdown. The rest, they had to settle for field goals. And again, they adjusted well. I mentioned what they did with Gaskin, where they realized that he was a mismatch issue, and they adjusted. Now, that is one area where I still think they need improvement. If you notice, that was one thing that is still a concern because any team can just do an inside cut and then go in the slot, and then boom, there's going to be a big play. Now, that was actually one thing they did do this game. They'd allow this game that they didn't allow on the other games was they had 9 big plays allowed on passing of 15 yards or more, and then 2 big plays on the ground of 10 yards and more. So they did have some big plays that they allowed. Again, in the red zone, they were clutch. They prevented red zones. The other thing is Anai was Anai in this game. If you remember some of the play calls sometimes that frustrated you. And when he was at Virginia, he did it again when he was at Syracuse. There was things that he was doing with Gaskin in the first half. Again, inside cut going in or a slant. And he didn't do that again for a while. And we saw actually him starting to do that again in the second half. And I think that was also what affected some of the stuff. But again, the defense didn't allow him to really adjust because they were bringing the pressure. And I'm actually going to bring this up because defense is a beautiful thing. We should just watch this all the time. Cam Butler with a sack. That was excellent from him. But he actually, when you look at it, he actually went too far out and then came back, bounced off his guy, and then got it back. Lex Long had a missed tackle there. But just grabbing him just for a second, they were able to actually bring him down. So kudos to them. And actually, I'm going to show another just compilation of great defense with them swarming Syracuse's QB, and then afterwards, QB getting picked off by Jonas Sanker. His first pick of the season. Syracuse coming into this game as one of 5 FBS teams without one turnover. They turn over the ball a few times against Virginia. So again, good job by Virginia's defense. I know everyone's going to talk about Hunter Stewart's face mask. Him and James Jackson came on when Josh Ahern was hurt and Nick Jackson was ejected due to targeting, and they did a good job. The young guys, James Jackson, showed vast improvement from his first game against Richmond. Nothing drastic happened against a Sean Tucker. He knew his assignment, he was disciplined, and he did well. And so did Hunter Stewart. I think also when you look at that secondary, they're depleted in numbers right now. Like we reported, Antonio Clary was dressed but could not go. It was a game time decision. It was hopeful that he could play, but then as game day reached, it didn't seem like he was going to go because he wasn't able to practice as much. And then when you looked at the roster, Cohen King did not travel with the team. We're hearing he's injured as well, and it could be long-term. So they were depleted in numbers. Again, they did a good job preventing some of this air raid offense getting too much yardage. And actually, let's look at here. Again, they were able to get 277 passing yards. Again, they finished with 352. They did a good job. Defensively, some stats. Nick Jackson led the way with 10 tackles. Jonas Sanker had 10. Darius Branton had 9. Lex Long had 8. So again, defense did a good job. And I'm just going to end with one more thing. The targeting rule needs to change. That is a no-brainer. When you see Nick Jackson being ejected for that tackle, you just have to shake your head and wonder, when is the NCAA going to do something about it? At that point, he was committed to that tackle. And then quarterback Schrader changed his level. What is Nick Jackson going to do? What can he do in that instant? And I felt really bad for Nick when you look at just the sequence of events. First, what a tackle. When I told you guys about how loud it was, you could hear every tackle this Virginia defense was doing. They were going out hard. They were flying. And we heard that tackle. But as soon as that yellow flag went on the field, Nick knew. Nick knew. He put his 2 hands on his head and just bent down. It's got to be frustrating for him. That was a play where you can just shake your head and be like, you talk about penalties that Virginia needs to clean up. This was not one of them. That was a football play. And I'm going to end with that because that just fired me up. So again, thank you again so much for listening to my game recap. We are going to go back to our normal schedule since the road game at Duke is a Saturday night game. So I'll be able to travel on Saturday rather than having to travel early. So we're going to have the takeaways from Tony Elliott on Wednesday and game preview on Thursday. I will have a caveat on that. I mentioned my son a little while ago. Good news, he's getting a new insulin pump actually today on Monday, which means we are going to be learning how to use this new automated insulin pump. When it comes to that, that means we might have a couple of nights where we don't sleep as much. I might have to go to his school to help the school nurse just adjust to this new pump. So I might not be able to get these podcasts up in the same time as I usually do. So that is just a little caveat. I hope to do everything normal on schedule, everything goes smoothly, but that's just a little caveat. So the plan right now is to have the takeaway episode on Wednesday and then the game recap episode. A game preview episode for Duke on Thursday. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I hope we have a good rest of your week, and we'll be right back here later on.